Hello again. This is eNCA on DSTV channel 43. Today, of course, there's one big story, and we continue to bring you rolling coverage of our local government elections. Let's go to the Western Cape now, where we understand bad weather has affected voter turnout in parts of the Western Cape. My colleague, reporter Ayesha Ismail, out and about in Cape Town. She finds herself currently in the area of Kensington. Ayesha, good afternoon. How bad has the weather been?
Dan, if you had crossed to me 5 minutes earlier, you would have seen me standing in the pouring rain, and I'm not sure if you can see, my jacket is quite soaked. I'm soaking wet standing here. And as I said 5 minutes earlier, it was pouring with rain. At the moment, the rain has cleared. We've seen people going into the Windermere Primary School right here behind me. Some people were allowed to go in as that cloud burst right here. You can see over here there are chairs kind of upside down, and there were party agents sitting here, but as the rain came down, they also disappeared. So, and this morning also at about 9 o'clock, when I was out and about following people like Patricia de Lille, who went to cast her vote just after 9, it was also pouring, but people still went out to go and cast their vote. But of course, that was in the suburbs where there is some, degree of shelter, whereas in the informal settlements, in the poorer areas, there's very little shelter for people. And we did hear from the IEC that the weather did have and will have an impact on voting patterns here in the Western Cape. Now, what we do know is that 3.1 million people are registered to vote in the Western Cape. Now, what we also know is that there are 30 municipalities, and of the 30 municipalities, 19 are controlled by the Democratic Alliance, and the others are in coalition governments. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether this is going to change, because we've had quite a number, an unprecedented number of new parties registering to contest in this local government elections, and also smaller parties, and also a lot of independents. So the question is whether these smaller parties and whether the independents will have an impact, and whether it would make inroads into the bigger parties like the Democratic Alliance and the African National Congress. Now, remember that the DA has been running the city of Cape Town for 15 years. And as I said, it's going to be interesting to see whether the other parties like Good and the smaller parties will be able to kind of wrestle control of some of those wards and some of those municipalities from the Democratic Alliance.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, of course, by later this week when the IEC declares those official results. But Ayesha, just a quick one. When the IEC updated the country about an hour and a half or so ago, they said that at about midday, right about 12:30, 3.5 million people had already cast their votes. The weather in Cape Town, how likely is the sentiment on the ground that it might affect the turnout?
Well, Dan, when we were here earlier, and as I said, with that downpour, we actually saw people who were standing in the queues outside here, running to their cars, getting into their cars and saying they're not going to be standing in the bad weather, in the rain. So it's going to be interesting to see whether these people will be returning later to come and cast their votes. Because, we know that once you're at home, do you really want to leave your home to come back to come and vote? But it's important for people to vote, so hopefully once the weather clears completely and before the polling stations close tonight at 9 p.m, that the people that have gone back home due to the bad weather will return. Now, at the IEC Centre, we also heard that some polling stations, at least 4 polling stations in the Western Cape, were affected by cable theft. However, they do have generators in those areas, and the IEC are not, they were saying to me earlier, one of the IEC representatives said to me that they were not too worried about those areas because they believe that their generators are up and running in those areas.
Thank you very much, Ayesha Ismail, for that latest update there from a part of Cape Town after that downpour. Weather has been a factor today in parts of the Western Cape. We'll have to wait and see if and how at all it affects voter turnout there. We know, for example, that in a place like Giyani in Limpopo earlier today, there was a hailstorm which resulted in a delayed opening of those polling stations in the area.